Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of Dusty Fans. This is going to be a series where I am documenting my GPU cleaning in a more structured way. Some of the other old videos, I just had like versions of them sped up with me cleaning them, and I wanted to add a little bit more depth to the GPU cleanings. A lot of these graphics cards I get from people on Reddit or people that donate them to me, and I want to maybe like add a little bit of backstory to some of these cards. And it seems like a lot, but I'm not talking about like interviews or anything. But mainly, uh, what I did was build this Dusty Fans website, and that's going to go along with the Dusty Fans episodes. And I have one GPU cleaning that I have up here, and this is going to be the one that we have for our first episode. So the idea is when I get these GPUs, I do a before benchmark. I do a before 10-minute stress test just to kind of see the long-term temperatures. Sometimes, a benchmark's only 60 seconds with Furmark, so it's not enough to really test whether the thermals are doing well. And then I'll tear down the card, I'll clean everything, and you'll see my cleaning procedure is pretty standard. Uh, over these GPUs, it's always typically disassembly. I will wash everything in soapy water, including the PCB. Then I'll use 99% isopropyl alcohol to wash out that water for any of the electronics, and then have everything dry, put it back together, and then I do basically the same thing as what I did before, which is a benchmark and then a 10-minute stress test with Furmark. And I might change some of these things up in the future, but right now that's what we're doing. And then I put everything, I take photos, I have video, top-down video of the GPU cleaning, and I create a GPU entry for Dusty Fans, and that's what it looks like here. So this first card I actually got locally from someone on Reddit, and it was pretty clean. It was in pretty good condition already. So we actually lost 5 degrees, and we'll go into a little bit of maybe why that happened. And then performance went down very slightly. It was like 2 points on the benchmark. So basically same performance, runs a little bit warmer. Um, but I'll create these GPU entries and you can see before and after photos, and then we can click into it. And each entry, so you can see we've got like the slug up here, the Gigabyte GTX 650 Ti Boost WindForce. Uh, these will be linked in this episode's video, so you can go and actually check out the website. But I wanted to make it kind of fun. I wanted to add a little bit more than just, the standard cleaning. I want to get some metrics. There'll be some cool like leaderboards. So actually, let's just go over those real quick. I don't quite have all the boards populated yet, and since I've only done one GPU, uh, there's not like a whole lot of competition here. So we're gonna have like hottest before cleaning, coolest after cleaning. Obviously, it's kind of odd right now because the after cleaning is uh, warmer, even though it's blue, than the before cleaning. Highest power draw, most viewed. This one, and then we're gonna have some like other interesting. I'm gonna take these emojis out. Went a little crazy. And then like statistics. So every time I clean a GPU, um, we will have like various analysis for the temperatures, but we're trying to get like the worst and the best. And then like number, after I've cleaned 100 GPUs, the number of thermal pads I've replaced, thermal paste I've replaced, average time cleaning, different levels of dust distribution. I have some really bad. In fact, like I was almost a little bit worried for my health opening one of the packages with these GPUs. So this one, it was in pretty good shape. So we're not going to see like a crazy before after, but some of these other ones are absolutely insane. I'm really excited to clean those. But then like brand distribution, right now we've just have the 1 GB, a GeForce 650 Ti. Oldest GPU cleaned right now it's the 650 Ti, but that will definitely be beaten. And then yeah, so not a whole lot here right now because I just have one GPU. But I think after I've done like 10, 15 episodes, it'll be pretty cool to come in here and check out these different statistics and the leaderboards as well. And then under cleanings, of course, we have our current episode, which is the GTX 650 Ti Boost. And if we go into it, It's definitely a 12-year-old card. We've got just 2 gigabytes of memory here. We have GDDR5, and the results weren't amazing. And I think one reason could be that I've read online that you need to have thermal paste kind of set after a few heat cycles. And basically, when I put these cards back together, I give them like an hour or two to just kind of settle a little bit and just dry out. I do wipe them off, or soak them with isopropyl alcohol to try and have all that water and moisture evaporate right away, but I want to give it a little bit of time. And I might actually even increase the amount of time I wait just to be sure. But then I do the benchmarks and the stress tests like right after. So it's possible that the thermal paste just hasn't set correctly or hasn't gone through enough heat cycles to really be working really well. Another thing is I just ordered some really generic thermal paste off Amazon to get it quick. I have new thermal paste. I actually did one more GPU cleaning already, so the next episode will still be using the old thermal paste. But the next ones after that, I'm using some Thermalright TFX stuff, which is supposed to be pretty good. I'm a big fan of Thermalright. I know that's kind of like a cheaper brand, but I've had really good results with all their components like coolers. So I'm hoping that their thermal paste works well. But here's the before after. You can see, the fans are a little bit lighter. You can see through them a little bit better here. There was a light amount of dust on the heatsink. If we go up here, there's a media section, and this will have all the photos. So I have one of those little spinny things, and you can see they're tagged like before or after. And, you can go through here and check out all the photos. I'm gonna do better with the photos. I'm still I'm not very good at like the video editing stuff. So, but it's kind of cool to see. There's somebody put like an A, it looks like, from before. Um, but yeah, PCB looks so good after cleaning it with soapy water and isopropyl alcohol. Everything on this card was like already pretty good. So then we have like the after photos, and yeah, it got like really clean. Like this looks almost brand new from the factory. Looks fantastic. I wish the performance would have been a little bit better. I am right now using the Miniforum's external GPU dock just because none of these cards have enough bandwidth to actually like overcome the Oculink cable. So I should theoretically get like exact performance. But I am working, my brother donated. Actually, I sold him a computer like a couple years ago. He upgraded now to a new one, so he was kind enough to give me one of my old computers back, and we're going to be using that as a benchmark in the future. What I really wanted was the horizontal mounted GPU, kind of like this, so I could get good photos of it and easy like test bench type thing. So hopefully we'll have that. It's just one of those cases which allows you to mount it horizontally. So should work out pretty good. We've got the stress test, so this is like the 10 minutes, and we can see like there was a 5-degree increase in not only the max temperature, but the average temperature. Power draw was basically the same, average power draw, max fan speed, so we did get a little bit higher fan speed here. And then we just have some graphs here because I think this tells like a little bit better story during the stress tests how things go. Pretty nice here. It's a little bit difficult to see on mobile, but if you're on your uh, desktop, not a problem at all. So got all these, and then we have the cleaning details. So I just kind of like a little survey type thing, the level of dust, estimated years. I mean, I'm just looking at kind of like the amount of dust here for estimated. If I whoever I buy it from tells me, I'll put that number there. Whether it's a like crypto mining survivor. This one didn't look like that at all. If there's screws missing, I do have some GPUs that are going to have some screws missing. I could tell when I open up the packages. Just what kind of work I did, how many thermal pads, what if I replace thermal paste in multiple locations, paper towels. I need to change the toilet paper uh, icon here. Um, Milliliters of isopropyl alcohol used, grossness, and then so basically, I have criteria for whether I'm going to give the GPU away, because that's kind of like the idea is I clean it, and then the ones that are still relevant, And by relevant, basically my metric is that it at least gets 60 frames per second at 1080p in the firmware benchmarks. And I think like the 900 series and above basically get that, but we'll see. I could lower it potentially. I just don't think anybody would really like get a lot of use out of this card. So, and these are for the cards that are basically donated to me. Some of them I will purchase, which are like nicer cards or cards that I want to add to my collection. Those typically I won't do a giveaway for, but we're going to have tons of cards to give away. So definitely subscribe if you're looking for an older GPU. Maybe you have a brother or a son or daughter, sister that needs a computer and they just need something budget and you're looking for a GPU. Uh, we're going to be doing lots of giveaways, and it's going to be simple. I'll probably have a dedicated video for how we're going to do the giveaways. But this episode's kind of a little bit longer because I'm explaining a lot of it. And then we have the blog. So I just do a little bit of research because I find it interesting to learn a little bit about the GPUs. I talk a little bit about the stress tests, technical specifications, a little teardown, some videos and stuff. So if you don't want to go through like the media, the other photos, then you can just go through the blog. It's uh, there's not a whole lot here. You probably get through it in like 10, 15 minutes or so. So each GPU cleaning I do will have a GPU entry in Dusty Fans. So, and there will be in the overview, there's a video section, but because I haven't uploaded any videos, like the YouTube videos will show here as well. So you can, maybe you go to the leaderboards and find like the hottest before or after, the grossest one or something. You can watch that video. You'll have links to it here. Okay, so basically after I do this chat about the entry on Dusty Fans, we're going to go into the cleaning. So let me take off this, and then I have a pretty standard format, so let's just get the video started here because I'm just going to talk over it. But this is the before cleaning. I got one of those cool little spinny things. And what I'm going to do is start out with basically do a full rotation of the before, and then I'll do a full rotation of the after, and then just because I think it's cool, I might change up some of this, but depending on feedback that I get, because I want this to be entertaining. And then okay, so you can see it's a little bit more shiny. I got all that. There was like a nice layer of dust on the GPU. The heatsink definitely had some dust. The thermal paste, it didn't look too bad. I think the thermal pad, I doubt it was original, not only because it had the little A on it, but also because it was like pink. And I don't think they do like pink thermal pads from the factory. So it looked a lot better, I'd say. This is just a cold start. This is dirty, so before cleaning. And then what will have after these, and I tried to keep these pretty short, just like 5 seconds. So you can see it's shinier for sure. It looks brand new. And then we're gonna have some audio now for the rest of the videos. So we'll do the sound for the before. Let me see if I can actually. I don't know if it's audible from your end. Hopefully it is. Okay, so that was the before and after for the stress test. And I mean, I think there's going to be some with like wobbly fans that make noise, some clicking, some like stuff that like causes noise, which is why I'm doing like kind of the stress test before and after sounds. So yeah, we're getting into the GPU cleaning, just kind of assessing how to take the card apart. I usually always start with the little back plate, or not the back plate, but the port plate. Get that off. This one's pretty simple, of course, just because if you've seen like some of the NVIDIA like Founders Edition cards, those are such a pain. They have so many different like small screws and stuff. But this one, all the screws were there. Everything looked really good. I've got a little like screw holder thing off to the side because I've definitely lost screws before taking apart GPUs. I've learned my lesson. That thing came off pretty easy. And then typically these, you can't always get to the shroud for the fans unless you take off the heatsink. So typically I end up having to undo the screws on the back and pull off the shroud with the heatsink all together. Not all of them are like that, but this one is going to be, well actually, I don't know, do I take it off before or after? Yeah, I think I decide to just pull off the heatsink and the fan together, and it's a little bit easier to get to some of the screws. Oh, you know what it is? It's usually the fan plug is, you can't get enough like height on it unless you take off it together. So there was just 2 screws to hold in the heatsink, and then 4 for I guess the GPU processor, whatever the main chip is there. Just those typical ones with the little springs on them. Just double checking, making sure that I didn't miss any screws. It's always a little scary when you start prying apart the PCB from the heatsink, but this one came off pretty easy, which was nice. Then you can see that fan plug right there, that I couldn't get that off unless I pulled off the heatsink. And they're always such a pain. Sometimes you can get like a little lip and like pry it. I'm just going to speed this up because you don't need to see me struggling with this. I finally just destroy my fingertips and just pull it out. Some of the video I will speed up just because I don't need you to see me struggle for a while. So everything looked pretty good. The memory chips are typically, you know, where the other thermal pad is, those are typically always the dirtiest. But overall pretty good. I noticed that the thermal pad, it was only like partially covering the memory chips. I don't think it impacted performance, but who knows. Thermal pad actually didn't look too bad. It was still very pliable. The paste was, again, it wasn't actually that bad, but it's good to always just get it all off and start fresh. And yeah, the screws on these are a little interesting. Sorry, sometimes I forget where the camera is. I'm just trying to assess where all the screws are, and there's these little tiny screws that go into the fins of the heatsink, and those always sketch me out. There's going to be 2 that hold in this one little black shroud that kind of sits on the underside of the heatsink, and then there's also 4 more that will hold on the main front shroud. Yeah, these old pieces of plastic are always a bit scary to pull off. And they have these little plastic, the shroud has these little plastic like fins that kind of stick between the heatsink fins, and those seem pretty fragile too. And I actually forgot to take one of the screws off, which is why I was having a little bit of trouble here. But I realized my mistake shortly. They like snuck one in just in one little spot. It was hard to see. kind of see the little dust patterns on the heatsink, and then yeah, the back side of those blades were pretty dusty, but nothing that would have actually like impacted performance. So this probably didn't need a cleaning, but it's gonna get one anyways. These fans, typically it's just like the 3 screws that hold them in, but you always gotta remember how the orientation is for those, because the cables sometimes route in weird ways. And you'll see when I put this back together, I actually do it upside down. I have to redo it, which is kind of a pain, but I speed it up for you so you don't have to see the whole process. The GPUs overall, I mean, these older ones, they're not as complex as the newer ones, so they're usually pretty quick to clean. And I suppose I could clean some of this stuff in place, but I just like to take it all the way apart. Makes it a little bit easier to clean. I think I can pop the blades off the actual like fan motors. I've been too scared to just try and like yank them off. I don't know if they're like not serviceable, because I was considering getting some like sewing oil and lubing up the fans. You can see here I'm just like checking to see if A, there's a lot of play, but B, if like I could pop those off. So if anybody knows, like if I can just yank those off, so it's just plastic, and then I can clean them in the soapy water, that would be actually great, because it would make cleaning a little bit easier. I usually like to scrape off as much of the thermal paste before I put this in the soapy water, just to reduce the amount of like gunk that gets in there. All right, time to get a little organized and get the soapy water. I just use a standard like plastic bin. Fits the parts great. I usually just fill up a cup of water, and then do a dab of soap in there. I have a really soft bristled brush because I don't want to scratch any of the plastic. You can get these on Amazon. I have everything linked in the description of the video, and they are affiliate links, so if you want to support the channel, click those links. And it doesn't add any extra cost to you, but I get a little commission for anything you buy. So it's a nice free way to support the channel if you were planning to buy something on Amazon anyways. When I started cleaning this GPU, I wasn't like a huge fan of the style, but as I don't know, I've noticed this when I start cleaning GPUs, I start to like appreciate some of the styling a little bit more, and like the Wind Force logo on the top there, and just, it looks pretty good. It kind of reminds me of like a fighter jet intake or something, or maybe like just like a jet intake with the 2 fans. None of this stuff was super dirty, so I'm pretty quick about getting everything clean. I always try to do the PCB last, so that it's the shortest amount of time between, because once I rinse everything with soapy water, just the PCB I dunk in isopropyl alcohol, and what that does is just wash out all the water, and it allows it to dry a lot faster. And I'm in Arizona, so I set it outside with just like a paper towel, and the heat, I'll put it in the sun for like 10 minutes on either side, and the heat just absolutely dries it out. It's already like 5% humidity here, so if I was not in Arizona, I might get like a hair dryer and use that. You want to be careful not to use like a heat gun where there's just so much heat. If you have an adjustable one where you can do a lower temperature, I'm not sure the exact precise temperature, but you do want to be careful not to melt anything, especially And I do rinse everything with water. I'm gonna eventually like add more parts of the cleaning, but right now you just see what I'm doing on my desk. But in future videos I might show rinsing things off with water, but you want to definitely make sure you get all the soap off of everything. And for the PCB, it's basically the same thing. I take the soft brush. I do have one that has slightly harder bristles that's smaller. If there's like small areas that I want to hit a little bit harder, just because maybe there's like caked on thermal paste, I will hit those areas with a slightly rougher brush. But this one's super soft. Gets everything out of all these ports and gets the card looking really good. Sometimes I'll notice that I missed a little thermal paste, and you can always clean it up while you're doing this. I think I did leave a little bit. I just have like a little pick type thing, and you can just push it out of the corners pretty easily. And when I first saw like some YouTubers, I've seen like motherboards where they're dunking it in the soapy water. I was a little bit skeptical. The first time I did this, it was like a really old, cheap video card that I didn't care if I destroyed. And the big thing is you need to let it dry out completely, and the isopropyl alcohol is basically a must, I think. So here I am, I've got on Amazon I ordered just a bunch of 99%. The higher the alcohol content, the better. And you can reuse some of this, so I'll actually recapture a lot of it. I'll take a whole bottle, basically dump it in, and then when I'm done, I'll pour it back into the bottle because by this point there's not a whole lot of dirt or any contaminants. And that way I can save a little bit of it. It's not super expensive, but you know, if we can save some, we might as well. And I just rock it back and forth a little bit just to like push any of the water out of the ports. The main things I'm worried about are like the power port and like the HDMI, DVI ports. And then time to clean up a little bit since everything's drying at this point. So I figure I'll take a moment here to clean. I always like to have a nice clean workspace. And one pro tip, save the thermal pads because you need to make sure that they are exactly the right height when you put them on. You'll actually see in the next episode when I was doing the GPU cleaning, I wasn't sure the height because there was definitely a WTF moment in the next one because there was like a really weird thermal paste for the memory chips, and there was no height. There was no way to see what the height was, and I did the wrong height, but you could notice it. And one obvious thing was that like when I pulled it back off to change the height of the pads, you could see that the CPU paste or the GPU like processor paste never touched the heatsink because the thermal pads were too tall and there was too much of a standoff. So I'm gonna speed this up just because it's just me cleaning fan blades. These aren't bad. The ones that really are not fun are the blower style ones. I can never get those clean. Those are the ones where I really want to see if I could just pull off the blades and just wash them in the soapy water because it's a pain. Alright, so I'm just going to clean up, I think, a little bit with, yeah, I think like when the isopropyl alcohol dried, there was like a slight residue. So just gonna, I have a little towel that I can dry it off with right away. I really want to make sure that processor chip is super clean so it gets great contact with the thermal paste. Like to lay everything out, just prepare for reassembly at this point. Everything is nice and shiny and clean. Pretty simple card. There's only a few different pieces. I really like the copper pipes on the older cards. I don't know if they do that anymore. Maybe it's because I grew up with these cards, but just seeing like those copper pipes on the heatsink brings me back. Okay, time for reassembly, and it's basically the reverse of assembly. You're going to see me struggle with the fans for a little bit here because I'm trying to figure out, okay, which side did those two little connectors go on? And you have to kind of like slide the fans through, which I struggle on a little bit, but I figure it out eventually. Persistence always prevails. This is me realizing I did something wrong. And pushing them back out, flipping it over, and putting them back through. The connectors actually fit really nice. They have like a little compartment for them. You'll see it in a second when I get everything situated perfectly. But I always want to like bolt in the fans first before I really start messing with the cable management, just because it starts sometimes it becomes obvious once the fans are in place where you're supposed to route the wires. But I love cleaning GPUs. It's so like methodical. You just take things apart, put them together, and I prefer to see an improvement. I am still pretty sad that so far I'm right now have made a GPU 5 degrees warmer. So let's hope we can in future videos improve that. I don't want to do, I know I could like modify the fan curves, I could modify things. I want it to be like a like for like benchmark. So there might be in the future where I add like a overclock section to this. So we'll do like before cleaning, after cleaning, and then like just see how much I can get out of the card with overclocking. But I'm not a huge overclocker, so I don't have a lot of experience. I'm not against trying, but for now, we're just going to do before after. But I do want to see some improvements, and I think I will. Some of the GPUs, I've got about 15, maybe 20 GPUs that need to be cleaned, and some of them are really bad. I can't imagine that we don't see some huge improvements on some of these, and they might be like, it's probably pretty hilarious seeing these. So, okay, got the cable management in all perfect. There's like little slots. I don't think you can see it probably in the video, but everything slots in pretty neatly, and then that little one cable has to run across the bottom in the channel. So I'm just trying to like assess exactly how that's gonna go. And there's little like indents where that cable kind of fits in so it doesn't come loose. So just taking my time here. The hardest thing is getting those little plastic slots to go into place, and the screws are a little finicky as well. I love that screwdriver. It's probably like a iFixit clone. I think it's called Strabito or something. It's really great to have a screwdriver like this. Just much easier than using just like standard screwdrivers you might have in your toolbox. So I highly recommend if you're going to be doing more than just like one. If I only had to do one GPU, I might just use my garage screwdrivers, but when you have a bunch of them, it's nice to have all the different sizes of tips, and yeah, just trying to make sure everything. Sometimes you can force things into place, but it's not how it should be. So I'm just trying to make sure everything fits naturally where it should, especially because these little plastic tabs are kind of fragile, and you have to be really careful about the amount of pressure you use when you tighten them in. You can see I'm just kind of like putting a couple fingers on the screwdriver, not cranking down on this. This is like aluminum or something going into plastic, so both of these you could strip out easily. So you really want to have a lot of mechanical empathy here, and just like the GPUs do vibrate a little bit, but as long as you have them like finger tight, they're not coming back out. I wasn't exactly sure which way that was supposed to face. I couldn't remember. So I'm trying to see like those little plastic tabs that jut down, trying to see which side will make it align with the holes in the heatsink. And it should have been obvious that this is the way that I was originally doing it, that this is not the way. It's the other way. Yep, that's the right way. Okay, good. Get that in there. And that, again, that little fan cable, there's little, on that plastic piece, there's little tabs that kind of go down to like clip that cable into place. And there's just 2 screws that hold this in. Okay, I'm gonna pause it for a moment and then I will come back. All right, I'm back. My son just woke up from his nap, so I've got him down here next to me. We'll see if he lets me get through the rest of this, but we are just putting together that last plastic piece here. Sometimes I like to just wipe it down one more time before I put on the thermal pads. Again, like, you just want the best contact as possible, and sometimes there's a little bit of residue from letting it dry. Alright, I want to, sometimes I feel like I can do slightly better than the previous thermal pads, but just getting some measurements here. I got these sheets, there's links in the description, so I can just make custom sized ones instead of trying to like buy the exact ones. The sheets come with a bunch of different thicknesses, and again, you want to make sure you have the exact thickness. I'm thinking about even getting like one of those little micrometers or whatever it is, just to see if I can measure the millimeter size. But most of the time you can eyeball it. This one, especially if there's like a previous thermal pad and they didn't just like try to put thermal paste or something where the thermal pad should go. One thing I always forget, so I put the thermal paste on typically and then I spread it with a spreader. But when I put the heatsink onto the PCBs, I always forget to plug the connector in first. I don't know if I do it here, but one thing to remember is to always plug the connector in before you put the heatsink on, because there's very rarely enough space to plug in the connector with the heatsink on. I didn't always use a spreader, but I personally prefer it just to make sure I just get paste on the entire chip there. A lot of people, I mean, you can still use the dot method if you want to, I'm assuming. Like, I don't really know, maybe GPUs are different than CPUs, but I always spread it. Ha, I didn't forget it. can usually use the bolt holes or the screws to use as like a guide to getting it on perfectly the first time. You don't really want to be picking it up, placing it down a bunch of times with the thermal paste and the pads, because the pads start to fall off and it just becomes a big hassle. So when you're lowering it down, just use the bolt holes for the screws to make sure it aligns pretty well. And when you're putting in, it's probably not as important, but I try to do, I just put it in a few threads at first, and then I'll do like a star pattern to keep even pressure as I am screwing everything in. Yeah, so just a few threads each screw, and just kind of, it can't do like a perfect star, but I usually go like up, across, up, across, up, across. So just kind of, as long as you keep a consistent pattern, it's usually totally fine. And then there's just two more screws here holding on the front part of the heatsink and really pulling it into those thermal pads. I definitely feel like the styling of this card grew on me throughout the GPU cleaning process. I think it's not bad. I'm a big fan of like the EVGA NVIDIA cards. Very sad that they don't do NVIDIA anymore. I like the boxy look of them, but I don't mind. Gigabyte seems to sometimes have the more like, at least on the older cards, kind of like the sloped and curved shrouds, which are pretty cool. I was never a big fan of them at the time, but looking back or looking at this one now, seeing the copper heat pipes and stuff, it's actually pretty cool looking styling on this. And I'm assuming like a 650 Ti back then, I don't think that was like anything that special, but this one was the 650 Ti Boost, so I guess it was a little bit better. We'll see how it does as I get more benchmarks in. Again, this is one nice thing of this little screwdriver is they have the little tips. It's like 5mm hex or something for those DVI ports. Never see those anymore, but it is nice to have the little tip that can screw those in and unscrew those instead of having to use like pliers to tighten them. All right, that's it. Overall, great GPU to clean, and I wish the results were a little bit better, but sometimes when they're already clean like this, we're not going to see a huge improvement. Thanks for watching this episode of Dusty Fans. As always, if you have an old, nasty, dirty GPU sitting in a closet somewhere collecting dust that you'd like to donate to the channel and have it featured in an episode of Dusty Fans, please reach out to the email in the description. It's going to be dirtygpu@hakedev.com. Any GPU that gets donated to the channel, which scores higher than 60 frames per second on our 1080p benchmark and doesn't have any obvious signs of failure, gets donated back out to the community. So if you have something that you'd like to see featured on the channel, please reach out. And thanks for watching this episode of Dusty Fans, and I'll see you in the next one.